Yes, good morning. You're watching Ireland AM. It's August the 2nd, but more importantly, after 9 weeks, it's a bank holiday Friday. Oh, yes.
Hallelujah.
Exactly.
Coming up this morning, we talk you through this morning's big stories, including talk of tax cuts and RTE's top earning list released.
It's been medals galore for Team Ireland at the Olympics this week. We'll be checking in with all the latest from Paris and the rest of the day's sport later this hour.
Following yesterday's promise to deliver an unprecedented 50,000 affordable homes to buy and rent, we'll be sitting down with Sinn Féin housing spokesperson TD Eoin O'Brien.
Mayo writer Colin Barrett's debut novel has been longlisted for the top literary award in the English-speaking world, the Booker Prize. We're chatting to him later.
And we meet the Dubliner who's getting the inner city running. And not only that, he was an X Factor contestant back in the day. I'm going to fangirl. I was obsessed with X Factor. We chat to marathon man Dwayne Edgar after 8.
Plus, comedian turned telepresenter Martin Beans Ward will be spilling the beans on his one-man show.
Very good, Martin.
Love what you did there.
Well,
Very good.
Can't take the credit for that line.
Now let's have a check on your morning paper, starting with the Irish Times. Its headline reads, State failing to meet asylum seekers' needs. It goes on to report that unaccommodated asylum seekers are forced to make an unacceptable choice between food, clothing or hygiene due to the failure of the state to meet its obligations to them, the High Court has found.
Revealed, bosses make up half of top 10 earners at RTE. That's the front page of the Irish Independent. The paper writes that RTE senior executives are paid higher salaries than many of their top 10 star presenters.
The Examiner leads with budget to cut taxes on workers. It reports that tax cuts for workers' pension increase, double child benefit payment and changes to inheritance tax are expected to form part of a pre-election budget bonanza.
Onto the tabloids, and the Daily Mail opens with that inheritance tax story, with them saying inheritance tax cut lined up for the budget. The paper writes that families in Middle Ireland are set to benefit from a cut to inheritance tax in this year's budget.
The Herald leads with Joshua murder suspect arrested. It reports that the chief suspect in the shooting murder of a young man in Dublin has been arrested after returning to Ireland from England.
The Star opens with Bishop Casey pedo probe. It writes that Gardaí are to reopen the files on Bishop Eamon Casey after allegations he sexually abused a niece from the age of 5.
The Mirror leads with the same story with the headline Casey rape case probed. The paper reports that Garda Commissioner Drew Harris confirmed Gardaí are examining the original investigation after concerns about its efficiency.
And the Sun opens with Orsome Twosome. It writes that rowers Philip Doyle and Darragh Lynch bagged bronze in the sensational final of the men's double sculls yesterday, bringing Ireland's medal count to 3 so far.
Now, it is official. We're getting a Britney Spears biopic. Universal has landed the rights to Britney's best-selling memoir, The Woman in Me. And Britney herself actually shared news of this on X, and she's very excited with the director and producer attached. Director is John M. Chu, who is directing the upcoming Wicked film, and the director is Mark Platt. But of course, the biggest question everyone has around this is who's going to play Britney? Who's going to play Britney? Who has it?
And so who's in the running so far?
Yes, so there's been a few names mentioned. Sabrina Carpenter.
OK.
Because she can sing as well.
Yeah.
Millie Bobby Brown of, oh God, the show, Stranger Things. Thank you. Sydney Sweeney. I'm not...
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's Millie Bobby... I suppose, you know what? Millie Bobby Brown doesn't look a million miles away from a young Britney there.
Are they going to do it from the
Sydney
younger
Sweeney,
days all the way up to now?
Sweeney, and then the final one is Dove Cameron of Disney fame.
Yeah.
Well, in her memoir, she does speak about from her days in the Disney Club all the way up.
Alicia Weir would be brilliant for younger Britney Spears, wouldn't she?
Yes,
in the Mickey Mouse Club
absolutely.
days, 'cause
Yeah.
Alicia's brilliant. She can sing, dance, do everything.
Yes.
From Matilda, the musical Alicia.
The Irish, yeah.
She'd be amazing.
Yeah.
That's a great show.
That's a really good show. Alicia would be delighted too.
Well, I don't know. She's flying it at the moment in Hollywood.
Absolutely.
Maybe she would. That would be her bag.
Yeah, I'm sure she's on their radar.
Yeah.
But I want to ask, who do you think would play you guys in a biopic?
Oh, good grief.
Come on, don't pretend you haven't thought about this before, Martin.
No, I was asked the question before, and I said Gerald Fleming. But then that was when I was presenting
Gerald
weather.
Fleming, the weatherman.
Yeah.
He's not an actor. Martin has to be an actor. Play the game. Play the game. Who would
I don't know.
Would you go for an Irish actor? Do you think you'd want an Irish actor? Colin Farrell, maybe.
I could see that.
Colin Farrell playing the part of me.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Who else do we think there?
Do you know what? Let's go not Irish. Tom Cruise. You know, for the motorbike stunt scene, Tom Cruise could do that one for
Well,
you.
you've seen the stunts I pull on the motorbike every morning when I come in here.
Exactly.
What's his name that plays Joey Tribbiani in Friends?
Oh, Matt LeBlanc.
Matt LeBlanc, I can see that.
He showed up for the Friends reunion looking like a taxi driver from Finglas. Did you say? Come on.
And there's nothing wrong with being a taxi driver.
I never said there was.
I could see that. You have a similar hair situation
Do you
going
know
on.
what? Why don't we do all three of them? So he could start off.
And move through the ages.
Yes.
And end up with Jared Fleming.
Okay, what I have noticed is that you're dragging this out on me when you haven't mentioned yourselves yet. Who play you? Pick on Martindale.
I'm sure viewers will agree that you would be Matt LeBlanc.
Yeah. Do you know the meme that went around on Matt LeBlanc when he was sat back with his arms crossed? Will you do that for us there? There I go. What I mean.
Ta-da!
We'll have to do a side by side, but like I think we've cracked it.
I think we have.
Yeah.
Who'd play you? Who have you thought about?
No, you were telling me people that you thought would play me.
Well, Yasmin Bleeth, I thought she's formerly of Baywatch. I
will
thought she'd be
take
the image.
anyone who's been in
Meghan
Baywatch.
Markle as well.
I take that.
Yeah. Who do you think would play you?
I don't know. It's hard to say about yourself without sounding.
I was only asked this for an interview the other day. That's the only reason it's on my radar.
Yes.
I thought Alison Oliver, because there's nothing I hate worse than a dodgy Irish accent.
Absolutely.
At least she's
Right.
from Cork and could nail the accent.
She could, yeah. And then the other one was Kate Winslet, which I absolutely could see as well.
Because I got drowned wet once when I was on a train. Actually, my screen test for TV3 donkeys years ago, and it was around the time Titanic came out. So I had red
You
hair.
didn't
at
have
the
to
time.
run your hand down the back of a car window.
I was in the train, it was worse. I was behind a rugby team stuck in the trolley, and they started singing My Heart Will Go On because the hair went curly. I was like this, like, oh God, please let the ground swallow me up now. So there you go now.
Who should play Brittany, but who should play Elaine? Who should play Shiva? And they've already sorted me out, so there
Have
you
you
go.
picked one for your own self yet?
I'll think about it. We'll come back to it.
Oh, this has been interesting.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to withhold that information.
Right, stay with us. We're talking through this morning's big stories, and that's after this short break. You're very welcome back to Ireland AM. Now, the government is talking about tax cuts. You think there was an election coming up this year? Well, joining us now with that and the morning's other big stories, our political correspondent with the Irish Daily Mirror, Louise Byrne, and chief reporter with Barra Media, Barry White. Thank you both so much for joining us on the show this morning. So, I don't think you'd want to be a genius to work out that there is an election in the offing sooner rather than later, and I suppose the latest kite flying has reflected that.
Yeah, I think the budget speculation gets earlier and earlier every year, but I think the 1st of August might be a new record, and because actually it's been going on a lot longer. I feel like all we're talking about at the moment is budget 2025, which is of course not until October 1st, but we are kind of seeing the shape of what the budget might be. So we do know that there is going to be a tax package of some description. It looks like that's going to be tax cuts for workers, perhaps an increase of the cut-off for the higher rate of tax, so you're paying the higher rate of tax at a later rate. But also what we do know is that there's other taxes on the way, stuff like a tax on vapes that was promised as part of last year's budget. Michael McGrath, when he was finance minister, said he would look into it. Jack Chambers saying yesterday, the new finance minister, that is now likely. Interestingly enough, actually, because when we talk about the budget, we often talk about social protection measures and social welfare. Social Protection Minister Heather Humphreys suggesting yesterday that there might not be an increase in job seekers' benefit for those who are long-term unemployed. She was suggesting, what's the rationale for it? We have full employment. Is there any reason that we should be giving people an increase in their social welfare when we have long-term unemployment, If
you're physically able to work and you're choosing not to have a job, basically, that's what she's aiming.
Yeah, and she was basically saying, there's other people who could benefit from higher increases, such as the pensioners, such as carers. So that all has to be taken into consideration. So it's kind of coming into silly season now. So you'd expect another 2 months of speculation until the actual budget takes place.
Oh joy, Barry, oh joy.
Yeah, another 2 months. It must be the earliest we've ever seen kite flying, the 1st of August. But if you look at it, tax cuts for workers, pension increase, double child benefit, changes to inheritance tax, it is really targeting voters, and it would make you think that we're going to have an election pretty soon. My theory is if you're bringing in cuts like this, if people are going to feel it in their pockets, they're probably not going to feel it until February, March, but I'm not sure the government are looking at it this way. I think that the election will probably be in November, and when we see kite flying this early, then it kind of points to that. But yeah, if people, I don't know, I always think if people vote with their pockets, and when it comes to February or March, if you're seeing more in your monthly, coming into your account monthly, then you might tend to vote for what's in government. But I don't know, it seems to be everybody's pointing towards November. But yeah, kite flying just the 1st of August, that's definitely the earliest I can ever remember. And we're probably going to have another 6 to 8 weeks of this.
Oh, I don't know. It'll keep us going anyway, I suppose.
It gives us something to talk about over the summer, yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of that, if they are looking at the so-called squeeze middle, they are targeting the voters, and that's what it looks like they are doing now. We have the inheritance tax. There's been a lot of talk about that. And as well as that, we have talk about what are they going to do in the USE charges to help low-income workers. Is there talk about that?
Yeah, so what they're talking about is perhaps lowering the rate at which you pay the USC, or perhaps lowering the ban. I think Fianna Fáil, I think it's up at 4.5 or 4 at the moment. It came down last year for the first time in yonks. It hadn't really been touched for a very long time. So Fianna Fáil are really pushing for that. And I think what's really interesting is, and you're going to see more of this over the coming months, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael playing to their bases ahead of that election, whenever it's going to be November, March, kind of sometime in that period, we know for sure. But, you know, Fianna Fáil are targeting the more lower income workers. Fine Gael, their base kind of traditionally more middle class. They're looking at hiring the 40% rate of tax, the rate at which you pay that. Inheritance tax is really being driven by Fine Gael. Now, Fianna Fáil do seem to be on board of it. I know Micheál Martin at Taoiseach was saying recently that, you know, perhaps it's too punitive, perhaps, you know, it's expecting too much of people. Perhaps there could be either a decrease in the rate of inheritance tax or an increase to the threshold. Again, we'll have to see, but I think as the election comes closer, you're going to have to see Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil diverging from each other if either of them want to secure votes.
And a double child benefit payment for Christmas as well, which would be very welcome as well for a lot of parents and households, I know. Now, another story in The Independent today, Barry, we have RTE's top earners revealed, and not too many celebrities, basically, for want of a better phrase, in this one. A lot of the top earners are the so-called suits.
Yeah, RT senior executives are paid higher salaries than many of the top 10 stars. So you've kind of 5 senior executives in the top 10, then you have the list of presenters. This was brought to Cabinet last week, and I think it does beg the question, when it was announced that RT was to get that €725 million bailout, why was this not published at the same time? Why has this been published in an exclusive in Irish Independent today? Because the public deserve to know this. And again, we're being told that RT is changing and they're going to cut salaries. But if you look at the top 10, and when the public look at this top 10 today, I think a lot of people will be annoyed by this. Joe Duffy is still the highest, 351k. Claire Byrne, 280k. Miriam O'Callaghan's on 263k a year. And then when people see that €725 million bailout, and they still see these extortionate salaries, people are going to be asking, well, RT are not doing what they say they were doing. They're not cutting the salaries as much as they said. And again, when I look at this as someone who works in media, I can't understand how anybody's paid that money. Like, is Joe Duffy going to get 351k anywhere else in Ireland? Not a hope. He's not going to get anywhere else in the world. I just don't understand the inflated salaries. Maybe it's a bit of jealousy because I know I'm not paid anywhere near that, but sometimes I be scratching my head when I see when these lists of salaries are published in RT. It's just some of the wages are unbelievable.
Claire Byrne did take a pay cut of 41,000, but I'm looking at that going, oh my God, imagine that's just a pay cut.
Myself and Barry were there earlier trying to figure out how many years of a salary we'd have to earn to match some of the people on this list. But I mean, I think what was really interesting is when Kevin Backhurst came in last July, he was saying in kind of months to follow that no one's going to earn more than the DG. We know Kevin Backhurst is on €250,000 a year. If you look at some of not only the top stars' salaries, but also the executive salaries, some of them are on substantially more than that. Like if you look at Adrian Lynch, the Deputy Director General, the Irish Independent reporting this morning that his salary was 287,000. So I think what's going to be interesting as, you know, contracts are renegotiated, as the top stars, as they're often referred to in RTE, as their contracts and their deals come up for negotiation, is Kevin Backhurst going to follow through on his word? Are you going to see some of those salaries coming down? We know Joe Duffy, I think it's been widely said that he's probably not going to be in RTE for much longer. That will he stay on? Will he stay on for another contract? It's kind of not looking likely. But the likes of, you know, Claire Byrne on 280,000, is she going to take another 30 grand pay cut if she's maintaining the same levels of work?
I have to say there's a legally binding contract in place for all of these people anyway. They have to be paid what they're legally entitled to by the contract they have, and until they run up or run out, it can't really be renegotiated. I think that point
yeah, and I think this is going to be the thing. It's when those contracts start to be renegotiated, when they start to expire, when these conversations start again, how much are these people going to be earning? And I think it's kind of next year, the year after that again, that these figures will be very closely scrutinised to see if Kevin Backhurst stays true to his word on this.
But if you look at the previous year in terms of honour, talent, and I put that in inverted commas very strongly, over 500,000 Ryan Tubridy was paid the year before. So, I mean, none of them are anywhere near that now, really.
And I think this is going to be the hard thing. And, you know, even when Ryan Tubridy was leaving RTE and, you know, there was that whole saga of he had renegotiated a contract with Kevin Backhurst, we had that statement then from him and the contract was pulled and Oliver Callan was obviously put into his slot. You know, all that kind of talk about money. It has been such a focal point for RTE. And now with this guaranteed €725 million in public funding over the next 3 years, they're going to have to start showing that that's being spent wisely, because it's worth noting a lot of people in RTE aren't on anything near that amount of money and do extremely hard work as well. So it has to be looked at in the round.
I wonder would it make a good film, this whole saga, because a lot of things being made into movies. We've just heard about Britney Spears there earlier on this week. The Saipan saga is going to be made into a movie with Éanna Hardwicke playing Roy Keane. If your life, Barry, was to be in a movie, come on, just lighten the atmosphere a bit. Who do you think could be a good Barry?
I've never had to think about this before. A biopic about my life.
Ever.
You think about this daily, Barry, I've heard.
Yeah, every morning.
It's the important stuff we talk about here in Ireland AM.
Jamie Dornan, because he's got a similar accent and a beard. I'm not as good looking as Jamie Dornan.
I think the accent is very important to nail.
Yeah.
How about yourself?
I honestly don't know. I was saying to Barry, do you shoot for someone like completely unrealistic? I don't know. Someone from South Dublin, if anyone wants to volunteer. I'm kind of hoping that a movie will never be made about me.
Amy Huberman-esque type
I'll
person?
take it. I'll take Amy Huberman.
I can see that. So we've Amy Huberman and Jamie Dornan on the couch with me. I feel quite blessed.
Not every day do you get this, Elaine, now.
I know.
Not every day.
Thank you both so much for joining us on the show this morning. We'll see you again shortly.
Stay with us. We'll be talking sport after this break. Welcome back. It's been another day of ups and downs at the Paris Olympics. Presenter of the Tackling Sport podcast, Daniel Hussey, is here with This Morning Sport. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning. Busy.
It is busy
Yeah.
and Olympic busy.
Yeah.
And, look, another medal added to the pot yesterday with the rowers, and more on the, the potential for more on the way today, he says.
Talking like
crossed.
Daniel Whiffen already.
Yeah.
So I was making this point before that if our athletes are getting more confident saying, I'm targeting a medal, why can't myself and yourself get a bit carried away? Because it's not going to make any difference, is it?
Every 4 years we become experts.
Exactly, yeah. But,
although this is your bag. You love the Olympics.
Do you know when people are like, oh, you watching the Olympics? Oh, I'm watching a bit of it. Like, I'm watching it. Yeah,
This is it. The athletics start today. So he talk to him next Sunday.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
When it all
That's
comes
what I
to
was saying.
that.
Like, a few of my mates are like, oh, it's going to calm down a bit for you now. What are you talking about? The athletics hasn't even started.
This is when it's gone up a couple of gears.
But,
anyway, Philip Doyle, Darragh Lynch,
Brilliant.
yesterday, bronze medal. And at one stage, we thought they were going to miss out.
So it was basically the Dutch and the Irish let the Romanians get away because they weren't a threat to their medal chances. Unfortunately, the Romanians seriously overperformed from the semi-finals, so suddenly it became a battle for silver. And at one stage, like you said, despite our poorish start, we managed to get up for third, and we were thinking maybe get silver to the Dutch. If we're a tad disappointed with a bronze medal, I think we're doing things pretty well, to be fair. The scenes in Tipperary, seeing the big screen up there, and all the athletes, the boxers, which we'll touch on, is brilliant. But a big thing, and I've said this before, what I love about all these athletes is versus other sports that are sort of hiding things from you, the GAA, Premier League stars, for example, these athletes love. They've had 4 years. They want to tell you their story in interviews with the likes of David Gillick on RT and whoever else is interviewing. And I've just found all the interviews fascinating, to be honest. But that's one medal done. I'll be fairly certain O'Donovan and McCarthy will add to the medal haul. It's just a case of what colour. And I would say they're ever so slight favourites for gold, just based on the semi-finals in the last few years.
Well, they're claiming that they're underdogs.
Yeah, Paul is. Yeah. I feel he wants to entertain himself a little bit because the last couple of years, just for whatever, the Swiss have sort of had a good year, and like we're the Davids here versus the Goliaths, we're the underdogs, and you can see Fintan McCarthy actually getting entertained watching Paul in action in the interviews, and you can see they do that to make themselves entertained. I find them brilliant to watch both in the water and outside the water, to be honest. And yeah, it will be probably between them and the Swiss whether they get gold or not. And
well, they're talking up the Italians.
The
Italians
Italians probably,
at least.
yeah. Though actually I thought of it there, the Italians are probably the second favourites, with Swiss in third. But I'm nearly certain they'll get a medal. But Yeah, I think they can do gold. But I think it'd be a great race, Martin, to be honest with you, just because, as I said, the Irish aren't the top seeds for the last year or two, but obviously they have that Olympic gold to back up. But they've been absolutely superb. Plus, we've got a couple other rowers in action that probably have outside chances of medals. But to have 4 rowing finalists for the first time ever, 2 was our best before in Olympics, shows you how well run that rowing team is. And this, when we made the break a few years ago with the O'Donovan brothers, how the investment there and Rowing Ireland has sort of taken a life of its own and really focused in. And it's just a high-performing team. And you see the results with the Olympics over the last few days.
OK, so the first week has been good to us. And with luck, there'll be more medals in the pool.
On the stat, 1960 to 1992, 4 medals for Ireland. We've had 4 medals this week. So we are living in unprecedented times.
Yeah. And there's more swimming events to come as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we keep our fingers crossed. Last night, we settled down. Yesterday afternoon and then last night, we settled down to watch the boxing. And whatever about Jack Marley, and that was our first heavyweight at the Olympics since 1996. For Dana Morehouse, how many of us were actually throwing things at the TV? I certainly was, because it looked like she was robbed.
Yeah, just quickly on, say, Aoife O'Rourke's one, right? It was more a refereeing decision. I could see why certain judges went that way. It was a close fight. It happens, and there was a lot of stuff on social media. I don't think it was as egregious as Dana Morehouse. I think we were just fed up at that point, and the build-up, and whatever you thought about Wednesday night's fight with Aoife O'Rourke, Dana, like she was the better fighter, and not even the better fighter. Say it was she lost 4-1 basically, and that just wasn't the fight. And you're watching this, like, quickly going to Kelly Harrington's fight. She completely dominated 3 rounds, right? 3-0 win to anyone who watches boxing. And the 2 judges gave her opponent one of the rounds, which was just ridiculous. And it just shows you, if that's the nailed-on fights, what's going to happen in a big fight like Dana Moore, or a close fight like Dana. And I feel sorry for her, because like this is so important to her, and she hasn't done anything wrong. And she said, like, her interview, she just couldn't believe how she lost 4-1. And it's just heartbreaking watching that, knowing that, like, you hate saying the judges, but like, boxing's had this problem right since back to Michael Conlan in 2016 in Rio. Rio was particularly egregious throughout the tournament, and Tokyo was a bit better, but it feels like we've taken a step backwards again in the boxing world. And look, it shouldn't surprise anyone, but it doesn't make it any less frustrating when it happens to an Irish boxer. And there's talk, obviously, that they haven't sorted out their disagreement whether boxing will even be in the Olympics come 2028. So that's obviously putting off a lot of fighters committing their future there too. So it's just a mess and a real shame, because she fought brilliantly, some clean punches, and fully deserved her to win that fight, and she didn't, you know. Yeah,
it would have guaranteed her a medal. And you know, she was fighting the French girl. There was going to be a massive home support, and she knew that. But for that result to come about,
just watching the fight, you're after round 2 and seeing the scorecard judges, you knew we were in trouble, and that should never be. You should never be thinking during a fight that I know it's good seeing the scorecards, that's like good transparency, but it nearly makes it worse, because you knew going into round 3, she's not going to win this fight, because she should have won, at least she should be ahead after 2 rounds. But look, and Jack Marley's one was a little bit different, because I thought it was actually a very high level fight. Watching it, you're watching this going, this is some really, really proper stuff. And you've seen the scenes of Sally Noggin, fantastic. I know a lot of people down there supporting him. He's only 21.
Yeah.
And again, normally I would say 4 years, LA, that's his aim. Again, as I've just touched on previously, we'll see. But he was probably beaten on the day by a better fighter. And you hold your hands up at that point. So there's no like sore loser mentality in Team Ireland, I would say that. Or Zorro to lose his head like he did in Dana's fight probably shows you more how egregious the decision was rather than anything else. So the team boxing, we'll have a review of it, because it has overall been disappointing results, but a couple of them have to be put in context where, you know, decisions could have gone either way, and another, you know, we still have chances of medals for sure. There's 1 or 2 left. Obviously, Michaela Walsh is a big one to watch, and big pressure on her shoulders, obviously, with the rest of the team. But there is context to that, so I wouldn't like I've seen some journalists in particular, you know, we need to review the men's Bales boxing, little things like that. I would hold off on that, and let's take everything into context and see where we are come LA.
Okay. Well, we have got medal prospects as well in the show jumping and sailing. If they can get a bit of wind, that might happen today.
And quickly on athletics, we've got so many in action. McCann siblings, Jodie and Luke, are both running today, so great stuff for the McCann family. There's so much going on.
Just very quickly, last night's European football, both Shelbourne and St. Pat's picked up draws. At least it restored a little bit of pride for Shelbourne. They still went out of the competition, But Pats go on.
Yeah, Pats, and they brought 350 to Liechtenstein. Looking at my Twitter, felt like everyone was over there too. I think I saw all 350 with all the messing on Twitter yesterday. It was great to see some good stuff with Pats and going over to Liechtenstein. And it looked, there was nervy moments this time, but Zach
especially when Vaduz went 2-1 up.
Yeah, but Zach Elabusi scored a great goal. He was brilliant on the day, and Stephen Kenny's got a great opportunity this European. And look, Shell's next European game could be in the Champions League, which just shows you that was probably important to get a result there. And 0-0, obviously the tie is done. Yeah, but 0-0 draw, and Champions League football could be the next time European football.
And we could see too that Damien rested a few players because they've got that Derry City game
Monday night.
On Monday night, so it's going to be a cracking game too. Listen, we may be able to get you out to talk to us next Friday. We'll wait and see. I'm
going to be watching a lot of the Olympics.
But enjoy the weekend in front of the telly. Cheers, Daniel. All right, up next, Sinn Féin's Eoin O'Brien on his party's plans to solve the housing crisis. We're back with you after this break.
You're very welcome back to Ireland AM now. Yesterday afternoon, Sinn Féin released a document detailing its plan to deliver affordable housing to all over a 5-year period. Sinn Féin TD Eoin O'Brien is here to tell us more about these ambitious plans. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for getting up early in the morning to talk
problem.
to us. Really appreciate
happy to be here.
So tell us what's in this plan.
So, as you know, there's a growing number of people, particularly young people, in work who earn too much to qualify for social housing, but simply can't afford to rent or buy in the private market. Or if they are renting, they're paying sky-high rents and unable to save for a deposit. So what we wanted to do is set out a very clear plan for Sinn Féin in government, where we would deliver at least 50,000 genuinely affordable homes to rent or buy for working people. And the key to this is, of course, the price you purchase them at. So just across the road from us here in City West and in Clondalkin, where I live, a new build home is now costing 450 to 500,000 euros. That's the price of a starter home today in Dublin. What we've set out in our document very clearly is how we could deliver really good quality homes for singles and working couples to buy at prices between 250 and 300,000 euros. There's an entire generation locked out. They're losing hope that they will ever have an affordable home. And we want to say to those people, we can bring home ownership back into reach by delivering through local authorities and approved housing bodies 50,000 genuinely affordable homes over 5 years.
What's the nuts and bolts of this?
So the way it works is very, very straightforward. If you buy a house on the private market today, the actual cost of building the house is about half of the all-in price. So the way our scheme works is government will fund local authorities and approved housing bodies. They will deliver really good quality homes. And the state will cover the cost of the land, the servicing of the site, the utility connections and waive development levies. And when you buy the home, you'll pay for the cost of construction. The home is yours, you legally own it, you can do what you want with it, extend it, etc. You can give the home to your children and grandchildren in perpetuity. And the state will give you free indefinite use of our public land. The one restriction is when you want to sell the home, and you can sell the home whenever you want, you sell it to another eligible affordable purchaser at the future affordable purchase price.
So basically the home isn't yours?
No, legally the home absolutely is yours.
You can't physically lift the home, put it in the back of a trailer and put it somewhere else. If you don't own the land it's on or the garden it's attached to, I mean, it's not really yours.
No, in fact...
Ideologically, yes, I get where you're coming from, but in reality, I mean, if you own the bricks and mortar but you don't own the land it sits on, well, technically speaking, it ain't yours.
Well, first of all, that's not the case. So right around the country, is
there an option to own the land it sits on?
No, but
okay.
Right across the country, there are tens of thousands of people who own their own homes but don't own the land. If you own an apartment, for example, you don't own the land. So the idea of leasehold isn't an unusual concept.
You can sell the apartment to whoever you want to.
You can, and under our scheme, you can sell the home. But the crucial point is, because the state is paying for the land and the site servicing, we want to ensure not only do you get an opportunity to buy a genuinely affordable home, 250, 260,000 euros here in Dublin, but the next generation and the generation after that also get to buy an affordable home.
So you can, just to explain here, so you're trying to make intergenerational tenancy here, basically, or whatever way you like to call it. So you can leave it to your children.
Yep, absolutely.
But in 20 years' time, you cannot sell it to anyone you want to for whatever price you want to. Even in 20 years' time, the government will own the land it sits on and will more or less dictate who it's sold to. So it's been called Marxist by some quarters, the whole ideology behind this. What do you say to that?
Well, I think anybody who thinks that selling really good quality homes to working people for 250,000 euros is Marxist has never read Karl Marx. The issue is as follows. Right now, there are young people, many of them work here, they work in the public and private sector. They cannot afford to rent or buy. So there's a responsibility on us to say, if we're in government, how will we make the aspiration of home ownership real for these people? And the way you do it is very straightforward. You sell them the home is theirs, and they can sell it whenever they want.
But
they sell
the people that you pick?
No, they put it into a market for people who are purchasing affordable homes. And what that would do with this, you'll have the private market
So
here.
you're trying to stop the basically profiteering when it comes to something like this, is it?
But essentially what you're doing is there's a private market here and people will buy and sell market homes at market prices. Beside that, you will have an affordable market where people will be able to buy and sell genuinely affordable homes. And by doing that, it means people who today could not buy a home, singles or couples on 55, 65, 75,000 euros up to 90,000, will have the opportunity to buy and also to rent homes affordably.
But rent is a huge issue as well, because I just know where I live in the Liberties now, there's thousands upon thousands of apartments going up in the last number of years. Not one of them is available to buy, it's all to rent, and that's for extortionate prices. So that is a huge issue, because I think for a lot of people the criticism over the years is public housing on public land, and that would maybe reduce the demand for rent. I know Iris Rate have actually their profits went down by 3-something%, but their demand went way up. They're making a huge amount of money here in Ireland. When we have these big conglomerates who are rental entities, can you do anything to stop that? Because by doing that, then you will ease the pressure in a knock-on effect. So yes, it's great to have homes to buy, but there's a rental market there by people who don't want to buy or not in a position to buy yet. And then you have the affordable homes, which for a lot of people, if you're earning 90,000 together or 80,000 as a couple, which that's just a very good wage for a lot of people, they still can't afford a house under the scheme you have. So, I mean, what's the
Sure,
it's a multi-pronged solution here. It's not just a one cost fits all.
Absolutely. And for those people, and this was in the plan we launched yesterday, we also have affordable rental. So there's lots of people, for example, who don't want to buy right now, or they're saving for a deposit. But the difficulty is if they're renting one of those properties you're talking about, they could be paying rents of 2,500 to 3,000 euros a month. So in our affordable housing plan, it's not just affordable purchase, but we're also talking about offering people really, really good, secure long-term affordable rental at or below 1,000 euros a month. That's less than half what you would be currently paying for a new rental in Dublin.
Now, when it comes to what's going on, I know already the government has come out, government parties have come out and criticised the plan. Darragh O'Brien, but yourself and himself, you're almost like the Kendrick Lamar and Drake of Irish politics at the moment, because you're giving out that you're unwitting pen pal to him. Stop emailing me, do your job. I mean, what's all that about? Surely you should be concentrating on more specific problems here and not...
So I've tracked 3 ministers for housing, and for me it's always about the policies. If a minister is introducing good policies, I'll support them. If they're introducing bad policies, I'll call that out. And since Darragh O'Brien has been minister, homelessness has reached record highs. House prices and rents have soared to levels never thought possible. And meanwhile, the government isn't delivering a sufficient volume of social and affordable homes. My criticisms aren't of Darragh. In fact, he's a very pleasant fella. My criticisms are of the bad policies that's pushing an entire generation out of affordable homes, many of whom are now being forced to emigrate. So I'm one of these people who believes you play the ball, not the man or the woman. And the problem at the moment is the policies of this government are making it almost impossible for people, even on good salaries, as you said, of 80,000 or 90,000, to be able to have something very basic, an affordable, secure home. And our plan, if we're in government, will deliver that for those people.
In recent months, Sinn Féin has been... the party has been dipping in the polls compared to the strength they had in previous years. You've been accused of pivoting on your policies, particularly when it comes to immigration, going down a more populist route. A lot of people are accusing you of doing the same when it comes to this now. Is this an effort to retain the voters that maybe would have voted for you in the last general election because the local and Europeans hit you harder than you thought?
Well, look, obviously we had a poor day out in the locals and the Europeans, and we've been very upfront about that. But we're now into the general election cycle. It could be later this year or next year. And there's a lot of people who are going to be looking to see on the really big issues that matter to people, on housing, on healthcare, on childcare, on cost of living.
To the right a little bit. So what do you think about that?
In fact, if you look at what we're doing on housing, we've been talking about these issues as long as I've been
in immigration,
the spokesperson.
for example.
No, but even on immigration, the problem is, just as the government is making a mess of housing and healthcare, they're making a mess of the provision of temporary accommodation for people seeking asylum in this country.
Like the court judgment yesterday.
And we
in terms
have,
of the
absolutely,
services.
and we have set out very clearly a much better way to ensure those people who come to our country who are seeking international protection are treated with dignity, are treated with respect, their applications are processed in a timely manner. And where people have a legitimate claim to international protection, they're then given that support. Our approach is human rights based, but it's also based on efficiency and on fairness. And the big issue is this. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael effectively have been in power together for a decade. Housing is a mess, healthcare is a mess, international protection is a mess, childcare is a mess, cost of living is a mess. We want to set out very clearly, as we did yesterday with affordable housing, we have real, credible, costed alternatives. We can do these things better
So
if people
next
give us
month
that
we'll know
chance.
how we're going to pay for it, because we don't have that detail yet.
No,
And
the detail.
I thought it was detailed in September. Exactly what to do.
The detail for the affordable housing document is in the document. It's very clear. What we're going to do in September is publish a comprehensive 5-year plan dealing with all other aspects of the housing system, all fully costed, as was the plan
We'll
yesterday.
have to leave it there, Owen. Thank you so much for joining
Thank you very
us
much
on
for
the show
having
this
me.
morning. We're back after this short break. Do stay with us. Now let's check on your morning paper, starting with the Irish Times. Its headline reads, "State failing to meet asylum seekers' needs." It goes on to report that unaccommodated asylum seekers are forced to make an unacceptable choice between food, clothing or hygiene due to the failure of the state to meet its obligations to them, the High Court has found.
Revealed bosses make up half of top 10 earners at RTE. That's the front page of the Irish Independent. The paper writes that RTE's senior executives are paid higher salaries than many of their top 10 star presenters.
The Examiner leads with budget to cut taxes on workers. It reports that tax cuts for workers, pension increases, double child benefit payment and changes to inheritance tax are expected to form part of a pre-election budget bonanza.
Onto the tabloids, in the Daily Mail opens with inheritance tax cut lined up in the budget. The paper writes that families in Middle Ireland are set to benefit from a cut to inheritance tax in this year's budget.
The Herald leads with Joshua murder suspect arrested. It reports that the chief suspect in the shooting murder of a young man in Dublin has been arrested after returning to Ireland from England.
The Star opens with Bishop Casey pedo probe. It writes that Gardaí are to reopen the files on Bishop Eamon Casey after allegations he sexually abused a niece from the age of 5.
The Mirror leads with the same story, with the headline "Casey rape case probed." The paper reports that Garda Commissioner Drew Harris confirmed Gardaí are examining the original investigation after concerns about its efficiency.
And the Sun opens with awesome twosome. It writes that rowers Philip Doyle and Dara Lynch bagged bronze in the sensational final of the men's double sculls yesterday, bringing Ireland's medal count to 4 so far.
Now, earlier on, we were discussing Britney Spears. She's going to have a biopic made of her memoir, and we were discussing who would play Britney, and that got us thinking about who would play us. So earlier on, Elaine suggested that Matt LeBlanc would be a great replica of Martin, and we got Martin to imitate Matt's most recent...
Go on, say it to me. Go on, say the phrase.
How you doing?
Hey, you know you got it.
Uncanny.
Look at that.
That's bang on, Elaine. Honestly, that was a great suggestion. What do you think, Martin?
You've got better hair, though.
Yeah, I know.
You have, yeah.
How you doing? I love
How
it.
you doing?
I love it. I think, come on.
Nobody eats Martin's food.
You have to. That is very true. You keep your own food for your own self. Like, our viewers have to agree with us now, in fairness.
They do, they
the
do.
absolute image.
It is.
Absolute image. Has
And
to be
then
done.
Tina texted in saying, I think Idina Menzel should play Elaine. Do you know Idina Menzel?
She's the singer.
Yes, she played Elphaba and Wicked on Broadway.
Okay.
That's not
hang on.
bad. There you go. Yeah, she was in Frozen as well.
Oh, yeah, she was Elsa or Anna. Hang on. Hang on.
Oh, yeah, she was Elsa and she
The other
was
way.
Enchanted.
Yeah, there you go.
Elsa.
There you go. I see it.
I'll get myself a Netflix
That's kind of
and
working.
I might have it. There we go. And how about your good self?
Okay, so then PK says, he comes in with a suggestion for all three. He said Martin, Matt LeBlanc, Elaine, Rachel Weisz.
Oh, I'll take that.
Absolutely. She's married to
Daniel Craig, yeah.
I don't fancy Daniel Craig.
Okay, so take Rachel Weisz.
I'll take Rachel Weisz, not
Okay,
Daniel
we'll
Craig.
leave the husband.
'Cause clearly I would have a chance with Daniel Craig. No.
That's not bad at all.
Oh, I wish.
And then for myself, he
Go on.
suggested Natalie Portman.
Oh, I can see it.
Can we see it?
I don't know if I see it, but I'll take it. God, in a million years, I'd take it.
Okay, I think. Do we have a picture of Natalie Portman anywhere?
This way?
Yeah.
Yeah. You look. I think that you look a bit like What's her name? Jessica Biel.
Oh, dear.
Jessica Biel, yeah. Yeah.
But do you like Justin Trousersnake? That is the question.
Oh,
They're married.
no.
See, there you go.
No.
He's punching there, in fairness.
He absolutely is.
Yeah.
So that's my husband.
I like her views. They're very nice.
have we
Sending
kind
us
of,
nice things.
now that you mentioned Justin Trousersnake, have we kind of gone full circle now and we're back to Britney again?
Dun, dun, dun.
This is like the 5
Those
6 degrees of
6
separation.
degrees of separation.
Exactly.
And here we are
Kevin
again.
Bacon.
Back again.
Yeah, there
Back
we go.
again.
Okay.
I like that. But like, if you had to pick though, would you pick? I mean, Jessica Biel is a good one.
I would pick Jessica Biel because that's very flattering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like her
Huge
viewers. Are
compliment.
very, very, very nice to us
Yeah.
today.
Or any of the Jessicas. I'd take Jessica Alba. I don't think I look like her, but I'd take it if she was happy to accept the position.
Jessica Tandy.
Don't know who that is.
She's
Wow, that's showbiz. That is
I do
showbiz.
apologise. I think she popped her clogs ages ago. Driving Miss Daisy.
Yeah, so I don't know if she could play the role of...
I was thinking of Jessica Lang. And she's,
Oh, I love Jessica Lange.
yeah, sorry. Oh, I need more coffee. I need more coffee.
Cocoon. I know I want to watch Cocoon
Okay,
again.
Yeah.
I have another great question for us
Yeah.
today.
Go on.
So you might have seen on social media, she's made a splash this week. An Olympic medalist, Georgia Villa. She's an Italian gymnast. So herself and the Italian team won silver medals this week. Their first medal in gymnastics since 1928 for Italy. But she especially has been making a splash on social media because she is sponsored by Parmesan cheese.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
so there's lots of photos of her posing with the cheese. She's on the wheels. She's
Is she
pumping
doing the
wheels.
splits on cheese?
She is. Of course she is, Elaine. Why wouldn't you do the splits on cheese?
Like, for obvious reasons, I would have thought. But there you go.
I think it looks very intimate and cosy and patriotic, right? For an Italian gymnast to be sponsored by Parmesan cheese.
You're a mad lover of cheese, aren't
would
you?
she- would
You're an
Parme-
Olympian. You'd probably be sponsored by Cashel Blue or something.
This was my question. If you were to be sponsored by something, what would it be?
We've gone from actors who would play you
Yes.
to what cheese would you
No,
be?
it doesn't have to be cheese. I think it could be anything.
All right.
What would sponsor you, Martin?
I have no idea.
There has to be some brand you love.
I would hazard a guess. Yeah, in fact, I would allow you watching at home to hazard a guess.
Is it the Dubs? You'd be sponsored by the Dubs?
Oh, well, always. Yeah, always. What? I'll take. Whatever. Yeah. I know some would like to be sponsored by anybody making a spice bag.
Yeah. I know we're picking on Martin a bit this morning with the joy from friends and
Have
everything
you
else.
guys, if something comes to mind to you, you'd be sponsored by?
Any food at all, really, to be quite honest, as long as it's not Turkish delight. Maybe a bit of Clonmel champagne on top of it all as well, but I'd be
Oh,
grand.
sponsored by champagne. That has a ring
Yeah.
to it.
Clonmel champagne isn't champagne.
Anybody,
It would be a cider, my love.
Okay.
How about you?
Actual champagne.
Yeah, there. See,
you go.
that's the difference. She's
a happy
classy,
girl.
I'm not.
Yeah.
Now, coming up after the break, we're chatting to Booker Prize nominated author Colin Barrett. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back. Previous winners of the esteemed Booker Prize include Iris Murdoch, Roddy Doyle and Enright. But could our next guest follow in their footsteps?
Well, Colin Barrett is the only Irish writer to be longlisted for the 2024 Booker Prize for his new novel Wild Horses. You're very welcome to the show. Well, not a bad outing for your first novel, really, is it? How do you feel about that?
I am still, it's still sinking in, to be honest, yeah. I knew about it a little bit before the rest of the world did, but it's not something you can really anticipate or legislate for. I mean, I was very proud of the book I wrote. It was my first novel. You know, it was a lot of hard work. Took a lot of help to get there with it. But yeah, to end up on the Booker long list is not something, it's simply not something you can anticipate, you know.
Yeah.
Okay. The Booker is, even to be listed, is a big deal, and it can change the whole course of somebody's writing career.
Yeah, I mean, it's the biggest, I suppose, literary prize in the English-speaking world.
Yeah.
It's open to every book published in English that year. So, yeah, I mean, to be on it is, and there's only 12, 13 books sometimes on it, and that's it on the long list, and that's it. So, it's it's an amazing piece of recognition.
Okay, well, it had me in after the first page was going, what's going on here with Dev, and who are these guys arriving at his house? So tell us the story about Wild Houses.
Yeah, so I mean, it's like most of my writing, it's set in the west of Ireland. I'm from Mayo, and so it's set in and around Ballina town. And the first character we meet is Dev, who's a kind of reclusive young man. He's in his 20s, And he basically lives in the middle of nowhere. And he's recently bereaved. His mother died, who he had a very close relationship with, and she basically waited on him hand and foot and took care of him. Now he's on his own, or he's with his dog, or his mother's dog, Georgie, who hates him. And so, yeah, that was the opening chapter there, Martin, you talked about, was the very first piece I wrote for it. And it was just this idea of Dev and his dog, and he's this lonely guy living in this house out in the middle of nowhere. And there's a knock at the door at 2 a.m, and there's like two heavies there, two serious guys, and they've got a teenage boy with them whose name is Dal English, and they've kidnapped him, and they've just landed in on Dev, who otherwise is living this life of complete solitude. And so I just thought, this is years ago, but I thought, well, there's something here now. There's a book here, there's a novel here, and it took years to sort of unspool it, but the novel unfolds, and you follow Dev, and then the other main character back in Ballinatown is Nikki Hennigan, who's the girlfriend of Dal, the boy who's been kidnapped. And she is basically the only character in the book with any kind of cop, So she's the only one who's capable. And it kind of ends up on her to sort of figure out what's happened to Dal and where he's gone.
If viewers familiar with your work, of course, would know you're set in the west of Ireland. Communities that are very close to your heart.
Yeah, I mean, that's I grew up in Mayo, and I always wanted to be a writer, and I moved to Dublin, I went to college, and I've lived abroad and all that, and I always wanted to write ever since I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until I started writing about the West, about a community much like the one I grew up in. All my writing is fiction, it's stories, it's it isn't real, but it inspires my work. It always has, the place I'm from.
Yeah, but where you're from as well, I mean, the west of Ireland has inspired so many writers over the years. Even we look at Yeats' country in Sligo. I mean, there's something very poetic about that part of the world, isn't there?
Whatever it is, I mean, it is a place, I mean, we say it about many places in Ireland, but it is a place of natural storytellers and people with a certain attitude towards life that is, there's a certain sort of dark humour, there's a certain sort of resilience when faced with the adversities of life. And so in my writing, I always wanted to honour that temperament, that sensibility. And to, not be sentimental about it, and to show the rough edges as well. But I mean, I became a writer when I started writing. I became a real writer, if you want to call it that, when I started writing about the people of Mayo, about where I'm from.
Yeah, well, say right about what you know. You mentioned dark edges. In this book, like Dev's character, even though he's in his 20s, he's not too far from towns.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of isolation.
Yeah, I mean, that's a sort of... that played a huge part too, because I grew up in a very rural place too, and so your neighbours they're down the road. The houses aren't stacked next to each other like in a town or in a city. And so Dev is living out in a really rural space, and he isn't that far from town. Like, he isn't that far from... You drive there in 20 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever it is, But psychologically, I suppose, because of the circumstances in his life, and you find out about his backstory as the novel goes on, it is as if he lives on the moon or something, He's in the middle of nowhere. And that sort of... I've always felt that growing up in Mayo. It's a beautiful place, and it's a wild place, but it's still full of empty spaces, It's still a place where the communities are scattered around often or clustered together, but there's all this space around them, and it's land, and someone might own it and all that, but it's still kind of untamed. It's still kind of wild in a way. So I wanted to get that energy into the book as well, and that sense of solitude.
I suppose Calm with Horses, we have to talk about that, adapted from a short story of yours, a movie starring Barry Keoghan. I mean, that really gives an insight into where your mind is set, really, when it comes to your writing and where you love.
Yeah, so I mean, it was a sort of a long short story or novella. It was in my first collection of short stories, Young Skins, and it got turned into a feature-length film. It came out there back in 2019, I think.
Surreal, wasn't it?
And very surreal, very strange, and a very... a nice, pleasant process for me, because I really wasn't involved too heavily. The production team were great. They would send me versions of the script and let me know how it was going and when they were going to cast it and shoot it. And but it just sort of happened in the background as I went on with my life, And then one day I got to see it and, blown away. Like? It was amazing. I mean, it actually... I was living in Toronto, in Canada at the time, and it premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival, TIFF, which is a very famous thing. They take over downtown Toronto for the weekend. And so the whole cast and crew were over, so I got to meet Barry that weekend and all the other actors involved and the director. And yeah, I went to the premiere and got to see it on the big screen, and you know, it blew me away. And you know, they did an amazing job with it. They made their own thing of it, you know.
Yeah.
There's still the story, and it follows it quite faithfully. But they also made their own thing with it, so I was just blown away.
How did it compare to what was in your head?
You know, it's kind of supplanted what was in my head now, you know. Now I think, when I think of the character of Dimphna, who Barry plays, I think of Barry Keoghan playing it, and Cosmo Jarvis, who played Arm, the main character, and Eve Alger, who's in it as well. I mean, they now have taken over. You know, I wrote the story quite a long time ago, at this point, 10 years, so I think of the movie now more than the story, even though the story is very much its own thing.
But because the story you wrote is a loudmouth, whereas in the movie, he doesn't say very much.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting things. You kind of, I was talking to the director Nick at the premiere, and he kind of just talked about the magic of casting, you know, because you start off with a story in my case, and that turns into a screenplay, and but then they cast it, and so it takes on a different energy then as well. And so yeah, the character Barry played, they knew they wanted him. This is before he was already his star was well on the rise, but he hadn't quite blown up into superstar status, I suppose. But they knew they wanted him because he just had this brilliant energy to him. He has a kind of childlike raw vulnerability, but then he can become full of malice at the drop with a flick of the eyes. And so he was originally written as a bit more of a loudmouth, a swaggerer. He goes around talking big. But in the final film, you know, Barry is a much more quiet presence, and so they knew they had something there with that, and I think they made the right decision to sort of just adjust the character a little bit to fit the actor and what the actor would bring to it.
What are you working on now?
Another novel, another book, yeah.
So how is it progressing?
It's going okay, yeah. I mean, I'm generally...
Because you've had writer's block before, haven't you?
No, I'm just a very slow writer, which isn't quite the same as being blocked. I would never admit I was blocked, but I'm definitely a slow writer.
Waiting for inspiration.
Well, the inspiration isn't the problem. It's just getting down and doing it. Yeah. You know, even with Wild Houses, it probably took 5 or 6 years to write it, start to finish, like including rewrites and redrafting and stuff. But I always had the story and I always had the characters, so that never changed. But finding the right angle for it and finding the right sort of, you have Dev and you have Nikki, and getting the balance between the two main characters, that took a long time to unearth. So I'm hoping, you know, we live in hope as writers. You hope the next one won't be take as long and won't take as much out of you, but it may well do so.
Hey, you've been put on the long list for the Booker Award. So taking the time has paid off. So
Absolutely.
It seems to be working for you.
Listen, it sounds like a 5 or 6 years very well spent from where I'm sitting anyway. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. It's been an absolute delight.
We'll have
and
our
best
fingers
of luck
crossed.
with the Booker.
Thank
If
you.
you need any luck, I think you're going to be there anyway. That's just my opinion.
All right, you can find Colin Barrett's book, Wild Houses, in all good bookstores nationwide. Up next, tips for making road trips with the family as hassle-free as possible this bank holiday weekend. We'll see you for that in a minute. Now, with the bank holiday weekend looming, many families are planning a well-deserved trip away. But as a parent, how can you keep the little ones from wrecking your heads, battering each other, or causing all-out mayhem?
Here with advice on how to handle the mayhem is parenting expert Aoife Lee of parentsupport.ie. Now, Aoife, hopefully there are families across the country getting ready to set off for the bank holiday weekend, because we haven't had one in how many weeks, Martin?
9.
As he likes to tell us, right?
9
Is
long weeks.
Is there an ideal time when travelling with kids about when to set off on the road? Should you do it first thing in the morning, or is the trick to wait until they're sleepy? Like, should you go through the night?
Yeah. You know, I think it depends on the ages of the kids, obviously. I've always said that when everyone's fresh and you're starting off your day, depending on where you're going, what mode of transport you're taking, if you've got the flexibility of being in the car. For the smaller ones, I would always suggest trying to plan the journey around naps. For the older kids, I would say let them know that you're heading off early in the morning so they're prepped, because if it's anything to go by my kids, they're in the bed till lunchtime. So giving them a sense of what your plan is. And if it is a case that you're flying, you're taking a train, ferry, bus, whatever, make sure to have the nap nap time essentials for the smallies so that they are kind of comfortable, because they're going to be out of their routine subsequently. It's just to make things a little bit easier for everybody, including the adults.
Well, if you're on a train or a plane, you have to go by their schedule.
Yes.
Yeah. But if you are in the car,
It does create a lot more flexibility, and it allows you kind of stop off along the way. And obviously, if they need to be fed, there's, you've got that flexibility, like I said.
Yeah, because the one thing parents do not want to hear from the back of a car is, are we there yet?
Yeah.
Are we there yet?
yeah.
Are we there yet? So prepare for the journey.
Yeah, prepare for the journey. And I always say there's a lot to be said for the likes of the having your fill of snacks ready to go, preparing for in advance as much as you can. I think if you've got any kind of a bigger family, stopping off, and it can be expensive. So if you can prep as much as you can, again, being with my own 3 kids, there's that constant grazing of snacks, and like that, when you're able to even kind of have them in your easy access bags. One thing I learned along the way was not to put all the snacks in their bag, because last year my youngest lad had everything eaten before we even got on the flight.
Yeah.
So that was my learning. But alongside that, then having your easy access bags, so everyone has their essentials, whether it's their devices, their activities, change of clothes, etc., and then having something for the adults as well, so everything is kind of handy enough
so
to
we
get
can
to.
stay sane too.
Which is very important. Let's talk though about the backpack essentials, because I think sometimes it can be very easy to overpack, to bring everything, the kitchen sink and all.
Yes.
What are your backpack essentials?
Well, that's it. I think we're all guilty of the making sure for every eventuality. Look, it's safe to say devices are playing a big role in our lives now more than ever. And I always say, and actually just something simple like your simple extension lead, or this is now more so for when you get to your destination.
Yeah.
When I'm talking about devices that you've got your everything charged up, you have devices like that, content is downloaded, so you're not relying on Wi-Fi on the other end. But I mentioned there the snacks. Something simple like, again, what you're actually packing within your bag is the likes of a simple cool bag like this. Yeah. This is a hot and cold pack as well to keep food cool or hot. So that's kind of like what can get the ball rolling insofar as what can be handy. You'll see there just even a car storage unit that you can kind of place on the back of the car.
Yes.
Handy for, again, our smaller kids, but you can see, put in the snacks and all the activities. Card games, you can't go wrong with a card game, even for the older kids. Again, when you get to your destination, all your snacks and bits and bobs, but that's a really handy one when you're going by car. And I always say the never before seen activities can sometimes be a real novelty and can be a great distraction along the way as well.
Yeah. No, but listen, before we had these car journeys to the other end of the country were always fun. So
I Spy.
Yeah, I Spy. And first one to spot a blue car gets
I know.
when we stop at a garage.
Or the Meath Reg or the Dublin Reg.
Exactly.
I know, you've only got so much headspace.
I used those regs to teach my kids the counties of Ireland and the provinces of Ireland. Or how many counties are in different provinces.
Good.
Yeah.
So there were learning moments along the way.
Yeah, and it passed the journey. It certainly helped.
I almost need a refresher course on that. We must go for a drive. You were saying there that so you have some snacks in this car thing, but you also said not to have them access to all the snacks.
Oh yeah.
Well,
who should be the keeper of the snacks?
It's the each to their own, right? I know my learning was not to put it all in the bag because it's just look. Our kids love to graze, like it goes without saying.
Yes.
Right? They can be a great distraction. It keeps the hunger pangs at bay, and you're not kind of grasping to try and find the nearest shop or whatever. But I would always kind of recommend that the adults have the vast volume there in their own bag, and then just divvy out as you go. And obviously the drinks and all that too. But
But with the devices, right?
Yeah.
Because not if you've got 2 or 3 kids in the back and you're trying to keep them entertained that car journey, you really need these because they will want to watch different things.
If you want a quieter journey, maybe, and let's all be honest with ourselves here, we're all human at the end of the day. These are handy for the small kids. The earphones are handy for on public transport. I mean, who really wants to be listening to Paw Patrol? You know,
I love to hear that, Aoife, because it really wrecks my head on public transport when there's...
But even adults, and they're absolutely blaring.
It's not just the kids.
Oh my God. So earphones for the older kids. I mean, for ourselves, make sure all that stuff is packed up and ready to go. And like that, there's nothing like a device that's on very low charge for a teenager. So again, reminding everybody to make sure everything is
Everything
charged
is fired up, ready to go. And these things are always brilliant too.
These are microfiber towels. These were a game changer for us this year. There's 5 of us in our family. They're so tight, neat and easy to pack away in comparison to 5 big beach towels. It takes up nearly a whole case. So I love these, and they come in several different sizes and great for washing and easy quick drying. So yeah. You know I'm a mammy when I'm talking about the convenience.
If it's got the
really
mammy's seal of approval, it's good enough for us. Aoife, thank you so much for coming on and chatting to us this morning.
Now, up next, we'll be meeting the Dubliner who's getting the inner city running. We'll be back with you after this break.
Hello, August Fáilte Ireland AM. Now, our next guest is a fitness coach from Inner City Dublin who established his own running club back in 2020 and continued to thrive with 250 members.
Plus, he's no stranger to attention, having reached the boot camp stage of X Factor in the same year One Direction was formed. Dwayne Edgar from Inner City Running Club joins us along with his colleague Darren Saunders and an array of very good runners. Good morning to you all. Hi, guys.
Good morning.
Now, Dwayne, you could have been Harry Styles, my God, but instead you're here with us.
We have our own One Direction. We're called One Infection.
I don't even want to know. Come here to me. Tell me about this running club. When did you set it up and why?
So we set it back up during COVID 2020. The reason for it was just get people active in the community. Nobody was moving, and we put a post out on Instagram. We had 36 runners at our first run, and now we stand about 250 active members 4 years later.
It's such a healthy, good thing to do because I know I live in the inner city myself and it gets a bad rap.
Yeah, but like there's amazing people in it. Look at all the sports people that's coming from it. And we always say the reason why the club does so well is because of people from the inner city. Another lad that helps run it, he's actually over in the Lev at the moment. Carl, he always speaks about the club being, the members being salt of the earth. Good buzzers, and just want to get out and have a bit of fun.
Good buzzers. I find that hard to believe. The noise out of this crowd all morning, right?
They're so quiet now, actually. Jeannie,
the quietest they've been all day.
All camera shy.
Yeah, exactly. Tell us a little bit of how both of you got into running. Start about yourself, Darren.
Dwayne is mad into me. He dragged me into it. Basically, that's what happened. I used to train under Dwayne in the gym, and that's where we formed a friendship. And
you've been running ever since.
And now his girlfriend shares them with me. So it's all above board.
Sharing is caring.
Yeah, why not?
But it's not all that straightforward. I know so many people that said, "Oh, I'm going to start running now." They take off and injure every part of themselves, and it's a stupid thing to do. There's steps you have to take to be able to do it properly and do it safely.
Yeah, well, like the first programme we put in place was a Couch to 5K, and from that we kept building and building and building. So from 4 years we went from Couch to 5K. The people gone to doing half marathons, and some runners even taking on triathlons and Ironman events. So it is, you can go all guns blazing, but if there's a right step in place over a couple of years, anything can be achieved.
So you do the Ironman yourself, do you know?
I have done, well, Jason, 70.3. It's mad, right? Because you're going on a night out with your friends, right? Well, going to mass. Next of all, right, you're checking, you're watching, they're like, relax, spend 10. You're on a night out. You're not running. So everything just...
It takes over your life.
You don't feel it, but it just takes over.
And talk to me about the community vibe of the club for you,
great.
Darren.
I love it. I'm a very out there person, like, as you can...
I thought you were shy.
No, that's the makeup. So, I love getting when all the group comes together. It's like all different people with problems, no problems, but we just all help each other out and we have great fun.
So
the fun aspect is really like...
I can imagine, I can tell.
Especially if we go away.
So how often does the running club meet?
Yeah, so we go 3 times a week. Monday and Wednesday is at 6:30 in the evening, and then we run on a Saturday morning. So 3 days a week. Monday's an easy run, Wednesday's intervals. We've an interval coach to back in, and then on a Saturday then we do a long run depending on what the guys are training from. So some could be doing say 4 or 5k to anything up to nearly training for a marathon.
So what ages do you have? What age gap, and who's welcome to the club?
Yeah, so the club is inclusive for all. Only recently we have, from a great idea from Abbey Windows, Jay, obviously you'll see Kobe, so we've Team Kobe, so we're bringing kids in with disabilities to anyone up to adults.
Yeah.
So it's inclusive for all.
Isn't that fantastic,
Yeah,
though?
it's
And it
amazing.
just fosters a sense of community and the sense of bonding with everybody, because I think that's very important nowadays, especially just to have each other's backs.
But the ethos of the club is just getting people out, having fun. So it doesn't matter who you are, bring as many people together as we can. Enjoy the process. Not everyone likes to run because it's beyond training plans and they might find it hard. So when you're with a mad bunch like this, it's not as hard.
I know, they're very quiet, really, aren't they?
Yeah.
Very quiet and well behaved.
Now, Dwayne, I cannot have you here without asking you about your time on the X Factor.
Yeah.
Tell us
He
about
loves
that.
it. He loves it.
Yeah, and you got as far as judges' houses, is that right?
No, boot camp.
Boot camp.
And then I got the boot.
And tell her who was in your
Then I got the boot.
So tell her who was in your flat. Tell her. It was a,
No, breakfast. Oh my good God.
Thank God he took up running.
Oh, jumping jacks.
Yeah.
You're getting your practice in.
No, it was one of the best experiences in my life. I'd always talk about. I learned so much. I was 16. I went on and had a ball. I genuinely had a ball. I got the boot camp. I obviously couldn't sing, but I didn't care.
Most people can't sing,
but
let's
I
be
didn't
honest.
care. I wanted to have the same with the club. I wanted to have fun. I went out and I enjoyed it. And got the boot camp. It was what the year One Direction was formed. Mary Bourne was minding me money in boot camp.
Stop it.
I was going to Mary, can I have 50 quid, you know? So it's just some of the stories we have, you can be here all day talking about them, but one thing I'll stick by is probably one of the best experiences in my life.
Do these lads still give you a slagging over it? Yeah. I think
Always grounded with this.
Now, you have a big event happening this weekend.
Yeah.
Some members of the club anyway. Tell us about that.
So this weekend we have, the club was formed in August, so every August bank holiday we hold an event. If it's 5k or 10k, this is our 4th event, but it's the biggest one we have. So from tonight we have a running festival starting with a race expo, and tomorrow we have 200 kids taking on just less than a K run, and then on Sunday morning then we've 950 people coming for a 5 and 10k race in the heart of the city from Henrietta Flats.
Yeah.
So it's a big weekend for the club. Celebrates the birthday of the club, bringing so many different running communities together. And for anyone that has been at our events, they're wild and electric. You know, you've saxophone DJs and bongos at 8 in the morning. You've all the L-ones out with the house
You'd
coats.
love that.
Hang on a second. I'll be skipping. I'll be at work at 8
You're
o'clock in
dressed
the
for it.
morning.
You're dressed for it.
For God's sake. After work, I'll pop down.
She will. So before we do any running, we have to do a few warm-up moves.
Yeah.
Are you going to show us a few now, Dwayne? Darren's going to lead us. All right,
Darren's
okay,
doing that.
okay. I'll
Go on,
do it.
Darren. Go on, Darren.
Right, we just start a little jog on the spot, right? Now heels up to the bum.
Oh, all the way up.
All right, lads.
right.
I'll break my neck, so I might sit this one out.
I'm gonna do. This is the Wayne's favourite part, jumping jacks. Let's go.
Very good.
Oh, then we do a little twist.
Oh, I like that.
Oh yeah. Why not? A little spring. All right, yeah, let's get a little bit of hamstring.
Oh, I can do that.
Oh, yeah, go on, Elaine. You can get the
Yeah,
stretch
yeah.
in. The cameramen are doing it all.
And swap the legs.
Okay.
Right, there you cross one over.
God darn, you have a fine pair of pins on you there.
Here. So this way we do the fingers. Right, you come up the body.
Ooh.
I'm not sure a pirouette is normally in the warm-up, so is it? But seriously, come on, up to me here now. Come on,
Kobe, come
Get
on,
the stars of the show are up here.
on TV,
Let's
come on.
show us.
Go.
Yay! What will you be doing now at the weekend? Are you going to run yourself? Yeah.
She asked her, are you going to run the weekend? Tell her, yeah.
Maybe. So, okay, just maybe. And come here to me. If anyone wants to get involved in your club, what do they do? How do they contact
Yeah, so
you?
they reach us out through Instagram. And Monday night we're up in the Grange Gorman, Wednesday's the Phoenix Park, and Saturdays from the clubhouse at Crow Park. But reach out through Instagram, or we have a website, Inner City Running. Inner City Running Club is on the website, Inner City Running Club on the Instagram. And then most of the people usually just show up without even texting us, and
They just land on you.
just land on
All
us.
right, I'm all warmed up. Are we going for a run?
You ready?
Come on, let's go. Let's go.
See you later, lads.
Come on, let's go.
That's my girl by myself.
Yeah, come on.
That's lovely. I've been completely deserted. Lads, are you coming back?
You do that all the time.
I go, okay, I go too, lads. See you. And okay, I can't read the autocue. I have to come back. And of course, a reminder, if you're interested in getting involved in the Inner City Running Club and you want to head over to their event this weekend, come back. Head over to innercityrunning.com for details. Now, still to come, comedian and playwright Martin Beans Ward is in the house, and we've a fancy sounding lobster linguine in the kitchen. Lads, do you want some lobster? Follow me if you do. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a minute. Now we'll take a final check on your morning paper, starting with the Irish Times. Its headline reads, State failing to meet asylum seekers' needs. It goes on to report that unaccommodated asylum seekers are forced to make an unacceptable choice between food, clothing or hygiene due to the failure of the state to meet its obligations to them, the High Court has found.
Revealed, bosses make up half of top 10 earners at RTE. That's the front page of the Irish Independent. The paper writes that RTE's senior executives are paid higher salaries than many of their top 10 star presenters.
The Examiner leads with budget to cut taxes on workers. It reports that tax cuts for workers, pension increases, double child benefit payment and changes to inheritance tax are expected to form part of a pre-election budget bonanza.
Onto the tabloids. The Daily Mail opens with inheritance tax cut lined up in budget. The paper writes that families in Middle Ireland are set to benefit from a cut to inheritance tax in the budget.
The Herald leads with Joshua murder suspect arrested. It reports that the chief suspect in the shooting murder of a young man in Dublin has been arrested after returning to Ireland from England.
The Star opens with Bishop Casey pedo probe. It writes that Gardaí are to reopen the files on Bishop Eamon Casey after allegations he sexually abused a niece from the age of 5.
The Mirror leads with the same story with the headline Casey rape case probed. The paper reports that Garda Commissioner Drew Harris confirmed Gardaí are examining the original investigation after concerns about its efficiency.
And the Sun opens with Orsome Twosome. It writes that Roar's Philip Doyle and Darragh Lynch bagged bronze in the sensational final of the men's double sculls yesterday, bringing Ireland's medal count to 4 so far. Right, still to come, we're catching up with comedian turned playwright Martin Beans Ward. We'll be back with you after this break.
You're very welcome back to Ireland AM. Now, it has been a very busy year for comedian Martin Beans Ward. First, he took a deep dive into our planet for a TV series on climate change and sustainability.
And after the success of his one-man show, he's back on stage once again. Let's get a quick look at Martin in action.
Have you eaten anything? Oh, Jesus, I look up and know it's about my mother. My mother's a great one, you see. She'd always surprise you like that. I'm okay. I'm not hungry. And there she was, dressed in black, like a big regal crow. Mascara streaking along her face, looking like the mistress of some politician at a state funeral. Lots of mascara, I mean lots of mascara. Left there, obviously, and most likely on purpose, you know, for effect, to let the world know she was crying.
It's brilliant. This play has been a massive success for you. It really has been. Are you excited?
I know, I was thinking the same thing.
But are you excited to be bringing it to the Kilkenny Arts Festival?
Absolutely. It's a massive festival.
Yeah.
I think at this stage I've done most of the festivals in the country. Like I started, so that little clip is actually from a work in progress. It's much better now. It's a lot tighter now. So that was actually my first time performing it out loud. And that was on a stage at the Town Hall Theatre in Galway during COVID lockdown. So there was no one in the audience. It was just myself and the cameraman.
Right.
Yeah. So there was no energy in the room. There was no kind of instant feedback. But that was for the Dublin Theatre Festival. And then the following year, I did the finished run, 15 nights sold out for the Dublin Theatre Festival. Yeah. It was amazing. But now it's going to Kilkenny. I've never performed in Kilkenny.
Have you not?
No, I haven't. I really haven't. And I'm
Not
really
even your comedy?
No.
Oh,
I
wow.
actually, you know what? Back in 2006, I think I did part of it ensemble kind of, you know, I think there was like 15 comedians. We just happened to get this pub that just wasn't being used by the rest of the comedy festival because I wasn't good enough, you know, to go into the Kilkenny Cat Laughs. So we all took this pub and we all did like 10 or 15 minutes. And it was great crack, but it wasn't. I was at the start of my career.
Now, you said it's a lot tighter now since when you first, but you wrote it before you witnessed the play.
Yeah, that's
nuts.
It's crazy, you know. But in my mind, I was thinking like, what is it? I'm telling a story essentially, and I'm acting out the story, and I'm playing numerous characters. So it's not too far removed from storytelling, which is something I do and have done. My family would be big into telling stories. That's something we would have grown up with. So I wrote this play, having never seen one. And then Willie White from the Dublin Theatre Festival said, you know, you should probably go and watch one. And I was like, yeah, I'd be up for that, actually. So he gets me tickets for this show, and it was called Conversations After Sex by Mark O'Halloran. And I remember it was here, and I was sat down watching these actors on stage, and I remember within the first 30 seconds they come out and they are stark naked. And I remember just pick up the phone and went to Woody. I was like, here, listen. I don't mind doing theatre, but I'm not fucking doing that, you know? So,
but you keep your clothes on for your one, thankfully. But you're exploring very real themes of bereavement and death. And yes, I know there's a traveller in it, but that's not the crux of it, really.
No, and this is the thing. It's centred around the dead house, which was traditionally where the body of the deceased was laid out in Ireland. That's nothing to do with just travellers. And that still happens in some parts of Ireland. I think out in the Gaeltacht areas and out on the islands, it still happens in rural Ireland. And I wanted to kind of capture that moment and also capture all the side people, the characters that we'd meet at an Irish funeral. You'll always have the people who will be making the sandwiches in the kitchen. You're going to have the men around the side of the house cracking jokes because someone needs to break that tension. Yeah. And those jokes are well received at a funeral because it's not at the expense of the deceased. It's not an attack on you know, them. It's more allowing the rest of the people at the funeral to kind of break that tension, to kind of, you know, because no one wants to be sad the whole time. And that's the great thing about an Irish funeral. You're always going to get that. And then the Irish wake is, you know, that's traditionally where the people have the drinks and there's a bit of a sing-song and, you know, we remember the person who's just passed away. And it's no different between travellers and the rest of Ireland.
No.
I think, yeah, it's quite common. Yeah. So the themes, as you were mentioning, some of them are quite deep, but it is a dark comedy because I do think that tragedy and comedy do go hand in hand. And if you're sat in an audience looking at this big bearded Aegis in a black suit and a black tie trying to make you feel bad for, you know, the guts of an hour, for me, I didn't want that. I wanted to give them the same release and laughter that you get at an actual funeral.
Okay. It's in the darkest moments when we find humour. So you know, and it's always going to be around, you know, times of grief when we will. I'm like you said, we need it to break that. But tell us about the main character in the play.
His name is Patrick, and people say to me, "Is this autobiographical?" And I'm like, no, it just happens to be another gay traveller. You know, it's not
There's more than one.
There's more than one of us. But I wanted to write from authority, so I made the character gay, and I just think it's an underexplored area, actually. Sexuality is very much underexplored when it comes to the travelling community, especially within theatre. And I wanted to kind of blend that with other complex issues, especially around, you know, the role women play in our community. And how mothers are, you know, kind of clucking around the son, you know, why haven't you eaten? And did you eat something? You know, use some mouthwash, you smell like a bear mat, you know, those types of things. And I suppose when I sat down to write this, I wanted to kind of encapsulate those people, if you get what I mean. But I wanted to do it in a humorous kind of way. And I suppose the biggest stumbling block for me was writing ethically. Because if I'm going to write about a traveller woman, and there's a character in it called Mary Catherine, and she will be reprised in play number 2, because, of course, this is play 1 of a trilogy. The second one is The Wedding of Mary Catherine. So it's 12 months later, and we catch up with Mary Catherine, and she's now getting married. And now I am going into the process of actually talking to traveller women, because I'm a traveller man. So I can't, you know, can't write from their perspective, and I want to do it ethically. And the same way with Patrick. I was able to do that with authority. But Patrick returns home after being in self-exile because of his sexuality. He believes that his community, they don't want me, and, they're always looking down the nose at me. But that's actually an internal thing he has. And the reality is, and I think the reality with a lot of families is, most people don't give a hoot. Live your own life type of thing. And a lot of our fears tend to reside between our ears. And it tends to be our own kind of thoughts, or family hate us. Your family tend not to hate you, by and large.
Internalised prejudice or homophobia or something.
Yes, not even that, but maybe an internalised fear that everyone around you is homophobic. Yeah. And I wanted to explore that because when I did come out in reality, it was largely supportive. I mean, I had a couple of nasty people send messages, but by and large, this whole myth that the travelling community are in the Stone Age is absolutely codwallop. I had a huge amount of support from my community and a huge amount. I had one mother approach me in how she could approach a conversation with her daughter because she knew her daughter was gay.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So, like, these things are important. And I think the beauty about theatre is you're allowed to explore all of these issues. And you're allowed to do it with some authority if you write about yourself. But also you're allowed to creativity. You're allowed to bring it into areas that other people are maybe not in a place where they can speak about it openly. I mean, don't I sound so theatrical? Honestly, I'm very wet week.
You do, but rightly so, though, because your success has been quite profound and you've come a long way in the last few years. But in terms of this play as well, you went quite immersive in it in recent times.
Yes.
Where did you perform?
So I love to challenge myself, and obviously not in a, I go to the gym kind of way, obviously. That's a challenge I haven't quite met yet. But I love to challenge myself artistically, and the opportunity came up to do a show with the Scripps Writing Festival in Birr, County Offaly. And I was given the option of a theatre or a funeral home.
Right.
And I just jumped at the funeral home, and it was so good. It was such a brilliant show. It was just a real funeral home, and like even when we were selling the tickets, it was like, the venue could change in really sad circumstances. Like if someone dies, we've got to change the venue. And like I was backstage getting ready, and there were all these coffins. Like there was no one in the coffins, but like, there was all these coffins around me.
Strange.
I know, but I really enjoyed it, and the audience really enjoyed it. In fact, the audience were so up for it in Birr, County Offaly, and I will say this: they turned up, and a large amount of them dressed for a funeral.
For a funeral?
I'm not even joking. There was one lady there, and she was wearing the veil, the whole lot.
Go away.
I swear, I'm not even joking. Like, they really got behind the whole kind of the theme of it. So, like, that for me was like, that's when it is immersive, is when the audience are really there. And we had a fantastic time. There were tears and there was lots of laughter. It was amazing.
I know, but when you walked out and you to perform and you saw how involved everybody was, were you not tempted even to break into 5-10 minutes of improv comedy on what you saw?
I'll always drift into improv, actually, and that has happened several times, even between lines. For example, at that particular show, there was one lady who obviously knows me for comedy and was laughing at parts that weren't supposed to be laughing at. I'm there, stood over my Patrick's grandfather's coffin, and it's like, looking down at his dead grandfather, and you have this one here, and she just busting her arse laughing in the corner. So I remember the next scene, I waited for the next scene, I came up, and it was like, the character Patrick looks into the mirror, and I just kind of went right up to her face like that, and I looked into the mirror, and there was a woman laughing back at me. And she thought it was part of the play, and then when she realised, she just sunk back. She just realised, and the rest of the audience copped onto it. They were like, just actually gave a round of applause for that, because it became immersive. And there was another with the Galway Theatre Festival. Somebody's phone started ringing, and at this stage there was the scene between Patrick, and he was dealing with the suicide from the past, and the phone starts ringing. Now, that person was obviously mortified because the phone just kept ringing. Doodle-doo. And I remember you could hear a pin drop, and when the phone stopped ringing, and I moved into the next scene, I was like, and then I head into the house, down through the corridors, down to the sitting room. I need to answer the phone because somebody's been ringing. And you could just hear the audience laughing. And I just turned around and said, it may be my grandfather. And then there was there's about 20 seconds, 30 seconds then of just people kind of giving a big, massive round of applause, because it's very difficult when you're performing live to deal with situations like that. But because of the comedy background, I love
can.
the improv.
Yeah.
And just on the note of comedy, like I'm just on the tail end of a nasty chest infection, but I was meant to do the Galway International Arts Festival with stand-up comedy this year. I'm supposed to be doing it all together now, but unfortunately I'm still not well enough to get up on that stage, because with that improv requires a huge amount of energy and mental energy. So for anyone watching that was expecting to see me at those, I'm really sorry. But I would have died on my whole life.
A big dose of antibiotics and going to bed, so we're appreciative.
Yeah, this is why they've sat me so far away from me.
He's full of germs.
I'm dosed.
He's full of germs. Come here. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for coming in today when you're feeling so unwell. I really, really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys.
And
good luck in Kilkenny.
Yeah, be sure to get yourselves over to the Kilkenny Arts Festival, which runs between the 8th and the 18th of August. And Martin's one-man show, The Deadhouse, runs from the 10th to the 12th.
Out of the break, we're fine dining with some lobster in the kitchen, so don't miss it. We'll see you in a few minutes.
Now, Fáilte Arash. This weekend marks the Rush Harbour Food Festival up in North Dublin, and we felt a bit like we were missing out.
Absolutely. So looking for us, Chef Niall Sabangi from the Salty Boy has brought the festival to us. Good morning.
Have indeed. Good morning. How are you?
What's for breakfast?
What's for breakfast? Breakfast of Champions lobster. It's a gorgeous lobster cut and rush by Alan, and then this amazing array of vegetables that are all grown in and around the area. So from these amazingly sweet tomatoes to the fresh garlic to everything. So
Is it true, right, that a large chunk of what we sell across the country, when it comes to vegetables, is made in North County Dublin?
Absolutely, yeah. It's a hinterland for Dublin. And, you know, if you drive out of Skerries, you drive out of Rush, you drive out of Lusk, you'll just see all these farms. They're generational farms. Yeah. They're there for, you know, for literally, 5-6 generations. I think these tomato guys are there 5 or 6 generations. The woman's still, I think she's 94.
Wow.
And she's still, not super active, but more active than I probably will be on a farm,
Okay, so what are you starting with here?
So this is a really simple lobster dish. I'm going to start off with some blessed garlic, just really, really thinly sliced. Kind of just think of those kind of mafia movies where they say use a razor blade.
Yes.
Then you get like garlic flavour, but you don't get that kind of punchy, bitter kind of flavour sometimes you get from garlic. Yeah. And they say it helps your breath, but I don't believe it at all. Yeah. But I don't mind garlic.
Just make sure the two of you are eating it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's mainly the sauce here is just going to be really emulsified butter and olive oil, which is delicious. And then if you want to, at the festival, actually, I'm going to do the same dish, but I'm going to show people how to make a bisque, like a stock from the heads and shells, which is amazing. You freeze it in your freezer. It's like a little flavour bomb you can either throw into anything, like from a breast of chicken to a piece of fish to some prawns, and we have a real quick dinner like that.
In your ice cube tray?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's the ideal thing for it, yeah.
And then you're using the whole animal in your...
Then you're using the whole thing, so you're being super sustainable, ethical, and just stretching it further as well. Like, I mean, this is lobster season now, so this is the best time of year. It's when they taste the best, and it is when they are at the most affordable. So if you're going to eat lobster, now's the time to do it.
Okay. So you throw in some of those lovely
I'm going to these tomatoes. I'm just going to let them melt in there and get many kind of different little.
Ooh.
Tomatoes aren't just red.
No.
Do you want to try one of these?
I thought you'd never ask, Niall. I really didn't.
Honestly, they're like these little flavour bombs. They're amazing.
Okay.
Ready? Cheers.
Okay. Cheers. You know this is going to go everywhere.
I'm going to do the whole thing. So
I'm not going to take the chance, because I know I'll wind up wearing it. I just know I will. Listen, while you're busy chopping, and this has been a really good week for you.
Yeah, it's been a great week, yeah. So during COVID, we started making seafood suppers.
Yeah.
And they went really well, and people were loving them and stuff. So then we launched the first in a range of seafood suppers just a couple months ago. And we won an award for the Great Taste Award, which is great to get straight out the park. Cooking like this or cooking in a restaurant is one thing, but when you're trying to cook and put it into a supermarket and sell it to people, it's just a whole different. It's very much a different beast.
Yeah, well, congratulations.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's great.
Those tomatoes are like sweets.
They really are. They're just incredible.
I'm going to try this. I just know.
It'll blow everywhere. It will. Okay, so what are you doing now?
So, literally, I just popped in some of the lobster meat, and that's going to start poaching away. I'm going to put in some white wine, and we're just going to get this whole thing melting down. It's super simple. Like, I mean, and this is delicious. Like, my partner Natalie, absolutely loves it. You can do it with prawns and things like that. So it's super, super simple.
Delicious.
Adds that kind of It sounds like a really extravagant meal, but it's one of those things that you can kind of put together in a couple of seconds.
It does. When I heard lobster pasta, I was like, no, that's gonna be complicated, but it's not.
This is having its crack.
You live on the coast, and so.
Sorry, I think this has gone off on me.
Okay, we might need a bit of help.
Live TV, folks, huh?
Live TV, love it. There we go, back on.
There we go, back
on. Perseverance.
So yeah, see, I live on the coast, so I'm very, I'm very lucky.
Fresh.
Yeah, but we all do. Like, I mean, you're never within more than really an hour's drive from the coast from anywhere on the island.
Yeah.
So it's amazing that we can enjoy seafood here, and we traditionally we've never enjoyed it as much as we could, but now that we all travel everywhere, we all love seafood. We all love going to Spain and Portugal and everywhere in the world and eating loads of seafood. So it's amazing now that we can do it here at home as well.
And we need to eat more of it.
We do need to eat more of it. I know you use some of these chilies as well. Do you guys mind spicy?
I like spicy. Do you like spicy, Martin?
I'm good with spice.
Yeah.
Again, these are grown in North County Dublin. These are grown in Lusk.
And now, do you include the seeds?
Yes,
you
absolutely.
do.
Yeah,
okay.
So you're going to get a kick out of this.
Yes, delicious.
I'll get a kick.
I eat very spicy. I'm half Egyptian, so I eat very spicy. And I'm constantly on the search, for the most delicious chili.
Yeah.
And then I had these last night. And, like, they're lovely. They taste like they're only picked off the vines, the leaves, or whatever you call it, one of those. Yesterday. So stunning.
Okay, so tell me how you do the pasta. So you've cooked the pasta first, Niall.
Yeah. So I cooked it till it's proper al dente, so like really with a bite in it, and then it's just going to finish off now here in the sauce as everything's all kind of melting down. And like that's it. It's so easy. So instead of using Parmesan, I've used some pan grantitos. So it's literally just some breadcrumbs. I used to melt earlier on. Just tossed off in a pan with some butter and olive oil, and salt and pepper. And it kind of gives you that umami kind of flavour that you kind of get from Parmesan.
So while you're finishing up there, Niall, tell us about the Rush Food Festival that's on this weekend.
So it's on this weekend. It's on Saturday. There's lots of demos, lots of fun, lots of things for all the family. And it's a great way just to kind of enjoy and explore our coastline and of course the beautiful, amazing North County Dublin.
Yeah.
Look at that. It smells phenomenal.
Yeah.
Well, the proof is in the pudding, so.
Yeah. And hang on to your pasta water. So usually using the pasta water is always a good thing.
Yeah, actually, look. And I did actually. Keep so thanks for the reminder. Good man. My dealer's assistant here.
This is why they pay the big bucks.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Look at that.
It is the best.
Look at that.
Okay.
And okay, you're gonna have a taste, Martin.
Of course I am. Yes.
I can bring it over. I can pass it over to you.
Yeah. And what are you doing at the festival this weekend then, Niall?
This week, the festival, I'm going to do this dish again, but I'm going to make the kind of the fuller version of it using the stock from the lobster.
Amazing. Well, a reminder to you at home, you can catch Niall at the Rush Harbour Food Festival tomorrow from 11:30. So if you're in the area, be sure to rock up and Niall will, of course, look after you. How is it, Martin? Okay, he's got a mouthful. I won't interrupt him. Give us a thumb. Oh, shit. Look at that. That's the signal you want.
There you go.
Niall, amazing. Thank you so much. Looks delicious. Smells delicious. You don't want to miss it, guys. Up next, we are talking summer occasion wear. Stay with us because fashion
gorgeous.
is after this quick break.
Really
Yeah?
gorgeous. Thank you, Noel.
You're very welcome back to Ireland AM. Now, there's still another month of summer weddings and numerous big horse racing events happening, so a girl needs something to wear for them.
Yes, and stylist Rosalind Lipsett joins us today, and we're looking at summer occasion wear, Ros.
We have some gorgeous treats in store for you today. If anyone was watching Ladies' Day at the Galway races, the style stakes were so high.
Yes, they've been upped.
Absolutely, they were beautiful.
And the winner was much like yourself, quite wearing a lot of black.
I did notice there was a lot of black and monochrome and white, and I do think that's safe. And it never goes out of fashion. Like, you'd look back at a picture of yourself in 20 years and it still would be in style.
Yes.
So today we're going to start off with some gorgeous looks from TK Maxx. TK Maxx is, you can find designer items for up to 60% less than the RRP. So there are amazing finds. I'll give you a tip though. You have to be prepared to look.
Rummage.
Yes, you do.
Need rummaging time.
Yes. And like, how exquisite does Yumiko look in this beautiful outfit? This is an absolute showstopper. It will be gorgeous for a cocktail party, a summer, maybe like day 2 kind of vibe, or a day at the races. We're going to start off with the designer-inspired sunglasses. I love that they're so big. They're kind of like a celebrity vibe. And then we'll go on to the earrings as well. The earrings are a really gorgeous statement piece, and that is something to look for when you go into the store. Accessories can really transform an outfit, and they have the most beautiful jewellery there and one-off designer pieces. Then we're going to go on to this beautiful shirt dress. This, I think it's just a very classic look. It's got this beautiful crisp material. We've opened it up a little bit, and we did add a belt here. It does come with its own belt, but we added this beautiful kind of basket woven belt. Like, it has that beautiful beachy look. So it really, you know, also very flattering. Cinches in the waist, and it gives a new dimension to the look. Then we've added this gorgeous bag. I think a neutral bag, especially if you're going for a bright colour like red. Neutrals can really tie in the look together, like a neutral belt, neutral earrings, neutral bag. And this bag you're going to get so much wear out of. It's a gorgeous classic bag and a really great size for all your bits if you're on the races all day. Now we're going to go on to these little mules. Again, you're on your feet all day.
Oh, they're so handy.
They're so handy. They go with absolutely everything. They're really modern as well, and they have that gorgeous block heel, so you're not going to be sinking through the grass. Again, very, very comfortable for a day at the races. I would say when you're going in there, look around at other size options as well. If you need to go up a size, you can always tailor. That is the beautiful thing about finding a designer piece that you really want. You can just tailor it, and it's made for you then.
And pretty in pink. Look at that hat.
We have Natalia here. She is ready for the Ladies' Day. Off you go after this. We're going to start off with the hats are from Mark Millinery. I'm wearing one myself. They started in, it's actually by a designer called Liz O'Sullivan, who started in 2013 in Cork. She started hand making bespoke pieces, and they're available to rent. Renting is a brilliant way of wearing hats for the races.
Because how often are you going to wear it?
Exactly. You're probably going to wear it once, maybe twice, and they are expensive because they are handmade, but to rent it's €60. And the great thing about Mark Millinery is they will give you a style consultation. So you just send them a picture of your dress and they'll send you the options that they think would work for you. They post it out, you post it back. It's very convenient. I think this is beautiful. It's very delicate. It's got that kind of traditional millinery style, but then with a modern twist. I think it's so intricate. Now we're going to go on to this beautiful dress. This dress is from Oh Hello Clothing, an online Irish boutique based in Sligo, which started in 2015. I love the detail of this. It's got this beautiful kind of 3D, three-dimensional print. It's got a lovely pleated look, really flattering and really hugs the body in all the right places. It's got a lovely stretch to it. It does go up to size 3XL, and I think it would be perfect not only for the races but for a summer wedding. You know, I know a lot. I personally am going to a wedding, my brother's wedding in September, so I'm looking for that kind of pastel maxi dress, and I think this would work in for so many different occasions.
You've nailed it with the shoes again.
Yeah, the shoes again, you know, they're only $19.99. You can't go wrong. A lovely pop of sparkle. Again, not too high on the heel because, look, I think we're giving our feet a break for the summer.
Yes, but you're so right about the grass as well. Like, no one wants to be sinking for the day.
Yeah, and especially if the daytime, the summer events are very long. You know, it's not just like a nighttime thing. A lot of the events are during the day. Yeah, totally. Now we have the dashing Alex, and he is back in TK Maxx again, and I love this put together look on Alex. Again, I think this blazer is a beautiful example of when you go in store, don't just look for the summer items. They have amazing pieces that will be coming into winter that you'll take out of your wardrobe and it'll be an absolute steal. They also have gorgeous Halloween stuff, so that's a great tip when going into the shop. We're going to start off with this check blazer. It's beautiful quality wool. It's at $129.99, which is an absolute bargain. And I think when you're wearing a big print like this, it's nice to go neutral with the rest of your look. So you can just, you know, take off the blazer and you're in your comfortable white shirt and you have your nice relaxed chinos. The rule of thumb is match your belt with your shoes. I think that's kind of like you know, the uniform for men.
Really,
it's a no-brainer for men. It's kind of like when we match our bag to our shoes. So this is a lovely belt. And again, the chinos are a really relaxed look, perfect for a day at the races, but also very comfortable. They have a nice stretch to them. And again, a really, really good price. And then we finished it off with the loafers, a little flash of ankle, because apparently that's in. Yeah, apparently men are flashing their ankles now. With the loafers, I think just adds a little pop of a fashion element. And again, keeps you cool on those warmer days. And I think Alex looks absolutely fabulous in this look.
A lovely smart casual look there.
Yeah, it is. It is very smart casual. And again, if you go into the store and you do see something like a blazer you like this, there's an amazing selection, but sometimes you might be struggling with the sizes. Get them tailored. You know, they're one-off pieces, they're amazing designers, and you're going to find absolute bargains. Great,
if I have time, I have great fun rummaging.
Me too.
And actually get absolute treasures in there.
When I'm in there for hours, I'm just like, but I find the goods.
Look at the drama of this.
This is the drama. And as you mentioned, I was looking at the Galway races yesterday, and a lot of it was black and white because it is such a classic, and this is kind of like an off-white cream, and I love the fluid lines of the hat. All Mark Millinery's pieces are handmade and they're just so beautiful. The fluid lines, the embellishments around the sides just add such a pop of, like, it just looks so elegant and rich. It's such a drama piece, so I went simple with the accessories here.
You're quite mysterious in that.
Yeah, is Emiko under there?
I know.
I would fall over in about 5 minutes if I
Can
wore
you see
a hat
through
that
it?
way.
Here we go. Yeah, she can see through it.
Excellent, even better.
Someone you didn't want to see, just pull it down a bit lower. Yeah. And then I've accessorised with a simple necklace here. Again, a really good price at $16.99. And then let us speak about the drama of the dress. This is such an exquisite dress. It's kind of almost giving old Hollywood vibes.
It's very Audrey Hepburn in My Fair Lady.
Yes, it is. That's what I was actually thinking. So I love the off-the-shoulder detail. Again, the hat matches perfectly to the sleeves. It is nicely fitted along the waist. It has a zip back, and I just think it's absolutely
boned as well,
stunning.
is it? Is the corset boned on that?
Yes, the corset is actually boned, so you do have support. Yeah, 100%. And then I love the detail at the bottom. It adds kind of like a modern twist to a more elegant, exactly, a more elegant outfit. And again, that is from Oh Hello Clothing, a Sligo Irish brand. They're known for their kind of evening wear and their designer bits.
Price for a dress like that.
It is. It looks, and that would be beautiful at a wedding, actually. Yeah. I noticed a lot of people wearing black now to weddings. And let's talk about the shoes. The shoes, again, look, I'm sorry that I'm so anti-heel today. I had a bad experience recently where I spent a day in heels and my foot was broken. So if you are in, at the races and you want to have a good time, there are some fancy flats out there.
Fancy flats,
there
we like it.
really are. I'm bringing back the fancy flats, and these are gorgeous. They're really comfortable. They do have like a little bit of height in the back and a lovely pop of diamante there just to jazz up the look.
Gorgeous. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Rosalind.
so much.
Once again, you're looking absolutely stunning yourself.
As usual. Anyway, we're going to head on over to Martin now.
All right, coming up tomorrow, we catch up with the Irish rowing heroes, Paul O'Donovan and Fintan McCarthy. Hopefully, they'll have Olympic medals to tell us all about. He's the Irish breakout star of TV mega hit House of Dragon. We'll be catching up with Clinton Liberty.
And speaking of Irish heroes, we'll be pitting our skills against the European Rubik's Cube champion.
We'll see you tomorrow.